In this video, I will be making an open desert terrarium. I will be using a wide vase for the container of this terrarium. For the drainage layer, I will be using Leca. For the substrate barrier, I will be using weed barrier, but you can also use window screen mesh too. And for the substrate mix, I will be using my normal substrate mix, which I will put down in the description. Another thing I will be using is gravel and sand for the top layer of the terrarium to make it look like a desert. Now it's time for the drainage layer. The drainage layer should be at least 1 to 1.5 inches thick. This is so that it can trap any of the excess moisture into the bottom of the terrarium. It's now time to put the substrate barrier in. You'll need to cut it to about a little bit larger than the size of the container so it can prevent substrate from falling down into the drainage layer, which we do not want. As you can see here, it fits perfectly right over the drainage layer. I'm adding gravel on the top of the substrate barrier so that it can hold the barrier down while I add the substrate. The substrate should go right on top of the barrier, and it should be spread fairly evenly around the terrarium for this type of terrarium. Now it's plant time. The plants that I'll be using are these small little succulents. I recommend adding an odd number of plants in because it'll look a lot nicer. I've brought the plants outside and I'm going to use my watering hose to spray down the dirt and take the dirt off of the roots so I can easier plant it into the terrarium. I'm going to start off by adding this small succulent cutting into the terrarium. I'm making a little indent into the substrate so I can add the succulent / cactus into the substrate much easier. I'm doing the same thing as I did with the other one to plant the cactus / succulent into the substrate much easier. Before I add the sand, I'll be putting a little bit of gravel onto the substrate of the terrarium to give it a more natural look. For the sand, I'll be using this homemade paper funnel to distribute the sand around the terrarium. Using this technique, it's definitely much easier to pour the sand into the spots that you want the sand to be in, rather than pouring it with like a cup or right from the bag. Using this tool, I'll be making the sand look a lot more natural and nicer, in the terrarium. Now that that's done, I'll be adding a little bit more gravel to give it more of a natural look like we see in the desert. Time for the finishing details. I will be using pieces of sticks and twigs I found outside. It takes me a few tries to decide where I want to put the sticks and twigs into the terrarium. I'm adding a few bigger pieces of gravel around the terrarium to give it more of a nice finished look. Here is my finished open desert terrarium. I really hope you enjoyed this terrarium, and of course, thank you for watching. If you want to check out some more terrarium videos, you can check out this one here, as I think you might enjoy it.